when you have your own law firm, I thought doing the legal work would be the hardest. It was running the business that was the hardest part of it, right? Putting in the infrastructure. I didn't even know what a tech stack was. I was like, I don't know what this is. But by the end, I was ready to roll. But just, all the logistics around that, I think are things that I took for granted. I thought the legal work would be the hardest, but that was like the easiest thing. I'd done that for so long. It was actually the running of the business. And I think that's what gives me a little more empathy with my clients, because I understand kind of what they're dealing with, to just know, am I going to make payroll, right? Is this thing going to be a bust? What have I done here? How do I engage with different vendors, market, customers, clients? It's just a different world outside of what you're used to doing and why you started that business, because you're an expert in X, right? Whatever that may be. There's a whole myriad of things around that you just have to also become an expert in.
Natasha, thank you so much for doing this. Welcome to Chase Brilliance. Thinking back to when we first met, we were in Las Vegas, and your firm was instrumental in getting me up to speed in one of my GC roles, which is great.
Oh, great.
And I brought you over from another company where I was in-house, and just wanted to express not just my thanks for the firm being able to help with that transition, but you being a great resource for me as I'm wading my way through law firm and scaling and building, which you've navigated in the past, so thank you.
Absolutely. No, I didn't know that I had such an impact, but yes, you are a brilliant lawyer, attorney, entrepreneurial, so I'm glad to help in any little way I can.
We got to keep going. Well, I think I'm going to start with your background, because I think there's something really unique about the way that you've been able to approach law, and I find this being very consistent across the board, is you had a career before law.
I did, yeah.
And that career may have set you up, may have not set you up perfectly for the work you do today, but tell me a little bit about how that journey was. What were the Lego blocks to Natasha's career as you make your way to where you are today?
I think it was very much taking opportunities when they were available, which I think sometimes is very hard for, I would say, younger people coming up, not thinking you're going to make the wrong move and regret it. So when I, way back 100 years ago, when I graduated law school, the economy was absolutely terrible. So my options were to either article, because I was trained in Canada, I switched to articling position, article with, an area of practice of law that I knew I had no interest in, or just pivot and go back to school again. Yeah. So at that point in time, I thought I wanted to have a career in tax, and so I pivoted and went and did my master's of tax. And that really got me into the accounting firm world, which I would have never endeavored in or ever had even thought as an opportunity. What I think was very unique is that large accounting firms are run very different, right? I think as a junior coming just into the accounting firm, I had access to C-suite individuals of, Fortune 100 companies. The CFOs would call me, say there's a problem with this, how do we fix it? So you had that interaction at a very early age to figure out, how do I navigate these personalities, right? Because as lawyers, we have many personalities we engage with, right? And how do I make sure I deliver something that's very succinct and usable by that particular individual? So a couple of them were very demanding. Obviously, you're CFO of a Fortune 100, 500 company, you're going to be stressed, right? But figuring out how do I meet them where they are to give them the information. And I think that was very instrumental in terms of me just navigating. I will always say tax taught me how to think in a very different way. I think I love the way of taking very complex things and then distilling them into things that people can understand. Because I do think that is a skill that some people don't have, and I like to really try to harness with associates, right? When you're in school, you kind of regurgitate what you've been told, you kind of put it in an essay, but you always have to back up and say, what am I trying to convey and how is that succinct? Have your backup, have your research, you always have to have that, but what am I conveying to the actual client, customer, whoever it is? So I think that's kind of where my career started, and it just gave me a different lens in terms of how to operate, right? I was able to see a combination of how law firms operate, how accounting firms operate, in-house operate, right? It's just a variety of different models. No one is better than the other, but I was able to take pieces from each.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of attitude and aptitude that you're chasing early on in your career.
Yes.
And I feel like you chase the challenges of, Deloitte, I know, was one of the first skirmishes that you had in your career. And so you and I share that in common. One of my first roles was in tax.
Yes.
And I had the ability to go into Deloitte's tax program, or there was an in-house tax position as well. And I think what's really interesting in those roles is, like you said, the aptitude is also kind of a byproduct of who you're exposed to.
That's
so
fair.
if you have that seniority exposure, you can understand how far your education, your ability to prepare for a conversation takes you.
Yeah.
And then everything else comes in is unstructured.
Well, that's fair. Yeah, that's a fair point. Yeah.
How do people prepare for that unstructured aspect of law practice? Because I think you started to go down that path.
Yeah, I think the way you have to prepare is to not be afraid, which sounds very odd, but I think what holds a lot of people back, and I think earlier in my career, which almost sometimes held me back, was the fear of doing the wrong thing, right? I think that sometimes you engage with associates and they don't have opinions, right? Because they're very worried about, well, what do you think? And it's kind of like, it's not what I think. Because when you were out there practicing in the world, you're not going to give me a call when I'm in my grave, right? You have to have an opinion as to what do you think? You've taken this, you've interpreted it. So I do think the fear of not worrying about being wrong, but just taking a position. As long as it's reasoned, you have a discussion with somebody. If they disagree, you disagree. I think that's one of the tenets that juniors coming up should really think about, is just having a position, a well-reasoned and thought-out position. I think a lot of junior associates I talk to as well are very concerned about having the exact answer right away. So sometimes that just delays them from responding. And you know this, like responsiveness is like the easiest thing you could do to make you look like a brilliant lawyer, to be responsive.
Right. Yeah.
Whether you have the answer or not, it's really just making sure that people feel comforted. Again, maybe it's part of my upbringing in the accounting firm. Somebody feeling comforted that, no, this person, this associate, she, whoever, has this issue, I don't have to worry about it. Like, I can trust that they have it and they'll run with it. And I think that is like the one thing that I tell all, junior, I don't care if you're a lawyer, whatever you are, that's the one thing that is such an easy, low-hanging fruit thing to do. Now, again, I follow that up with, you can't say I'll get back to you in a day and then you're a month later, right? Like, you lose some of your credibility over time. But, if you just tell people that, I am working on it and give them that comfort, it gives you a lot of credibility.
What's your secret on relationship building? Because I feel like so much of the practice today is how deep are those relationships? And you've talked a lot about already this ability to understand the humanity behind the work that you're doing, right? So it's not just a skill, it's the responsiveness. Yeah. It's how you make the person feel. And integrity is something that's easily lost if you make false promises.
Yes.
So how do you build that?
That's a good question. I've always been very interested in psychology, the way the mind works, the way groups interact. Like in another life, I probably would have been a psychologist or industrial psychologist, to be honest. But I think I genuinely have an interest with the people I engage with. It's not a matter of sometimes to my own fault, right? Sometimes I'm in a conversation longer than people are like, shouldn't you be mingling? I'm like, no, I like this conversation. But I'm very genuinely interested in how people react, what my interaction with them, how that makes them feel, or how it makes them engage with me, right? And for better or for worse, sometimes it's a good thing, right? Because you can understand, okay, I just need to tweak this, so I see that maybe caused a little bit of uncomfortness, now maybe we can work through that. And sometimes you don't want to modify your own behavior to make others feel better, right? So I think it's always a balance, right, between recognizing when you can have an impact and having that ability to really understand and engage with people on a more human level, as opposed to when that impacts you and your engagement in the world. So I think it's a push-pull, but I've always been really interested in people's life stories. I'm a huge proponent of you can learn from anyone at any stage of their career. Just because I'm a partner doesn't mean like somebody who's like coming out of university can't say, have you thought of it this way? And I'd be like, oh yeah, you're so right. Like that's a good way to think of it, right? Yep. So I'm very open to everybody's experiences because I think you can always learn. Like I know our profession as lawyers is always learning, but I think just in life you can learn from anybody.
I feel like you took this position in different parts of the market as well, right? So you were at Deloitte, large institution. You went to startups as well, and I think you've seen a couple of different models in law practice.
Yeah.
So how do you kind of rebuild that in today's market, right?
Yeah. So I think it's very interesting. I think when I was growing up, what I was looking for and kind of chasing, especially when I went to my own law firm and had our own law firm, was really just like a law firm that brought back a bit of humanity, brought back the apprenticeship, brought back the collegiality, brought back, some of those old school aspects of the law. I would say that every iteration of what I did really impacted what I did the next time around, right? So if you're talking about, we talked about the accounting firms, going in-house is a huge different beast, right? You very much learn how to run a business, right? Even though I was doing the legal work, I was senior enough that I did see kind of the interworkings, especially at Atrium, just of how do you actually run a business? What is required? And I think that helped greatly, as you were saying, when you have your own law firm, I thought doing the legal work would be the hardest. It was running the business that was the hardest part of it, right? The putting in the infrastructure. I didn't even know what a tech stack was. I was like, I don't know what this is. But by the end, I was ready to roll. But just, all the logistics around that, I think are things that I took for granted. I thought the legal work would be the hardest, but that was the easiest thing. I'd done that for so long. It was actually the running of the business. And I think that's what gives me a little more empathy with my clients, because I understand kind of what they're dealing with, to just know, am I going to make payroll, right? Is this thing going to be a bust? What have I done here? How do I engage with different vendors, market, customers, clients? It's just a different world outside of what you're used to doing and why you started that business, because you're an expert in X, right? Whatever that may be. There's a whole, myriad of things around that you just have to also become an expert in.
That's interesting, because in Deloitte, you knew the game going in. You knew that they were hiring you for your skill set. You had a foundation in education that was really strong, and they said, okay, I'm going to get X out of Natasha. So you operated from a source of confidence. In business, it seemed like you had the same confidence, but you knew that it was a different game, right? You just had to know the game that you were playing, and then operate from that source of confidence.
But I think you've touched on it. Every career engagement you get involved in has a game. I call it rules of engagement. Every, whatever ecosystem, however you want to couch it, has rules of engagement. And it's understanding those rules of engagement that will help you kind of move forward. And sometimes, you just don't want to engage. You find out the rules of engagement, you say, I'm great, thank you, I'm going to move on. But I do think all of them do have rules of engagement to help you succeed in those environments.
I feel like, so if you take the triage of technology, business, and law, all three are having fundamental shifts in the way that they're working today. Why didn't Atrium work in 2022?
That's a good question. We ask ourselves all the time. I think what they did really, really well was they curated an amazing group of people. We are still all very close, very smart people in the genres that they work in. I think it was very hard. I think they were ahead of their time, first of all, right? A lot of law firms were very skeptical of any type of, tech, disrupting tech coming into the legal field. Now, look at us now. Maybe they would have been successful now. I think you had to have the right liaison who could talk to the engineers and talks to legal, if that makes sense, and making sure there was bridging that gap, right? Because legal, if you think of it, I'm old school, I'm long in the tooth, you practice in a certain way, right? And this is how you did it, and these were the rules, and this is how we learned. And then engineers are like, but what about this? Why can't we do this? And you had to be able to translate, this will work in my world, or this won't work in my world. And you needed that kind of, I would say, bridge to kind of explain to both worlds why one could or couldn't work in the other realm. And that was I wasn't in the room with the board members and all the folks, but that would be on the outside looking in, would probably be the biggest thing I would say, is that we just didn't have that bridge who could speak to both worlds to help understand, okay, this is why this works and this is why this doesn't work in this industry.
Do you feel like it would work today? If Atrium started in 2026, would it work?
I think it would. Because they could rely on AI, right, to push them way further ahead, right? A lot of the things that were being built some of them were just root engineers, like just very smart people. Like I said, they curated a great group of very brilliant people to build something that I don't know if the market was ready for yet.
You talked about one of the things that you would fix is the bridge, right, between these different groups. What's one more thing that you think you would change about the Atrium model
That's a good
today?
question. I think that would be the main thing. Like, again, the teams were very good, and it wasn't like it was a them versus us. Like, the lawyers, the engineers, everyone would intermingle. Like, we were all friends. It wasn't like, they're over there and we don't engage with them. Everybody would engage. We'd have regular meetings. We'd have discussion about the tech. I just don't think that you needed that one key person to be the bridge. That spoke both languages, maybe. Maybe that's the better way to couch it.
Bridge and timing,
yeah.
it sounds like.
Yeah, exactly. That's fair. That's fair. I think, honestly, 2026, I'm sure they would be fine.
Yeah. Well, let's shift. Let's talk about your practice today.
Yeah.
I'd love to understand what makes you really good at talking to startups and being a tremendous advisor to them. You were there for me when I needed it. I think even as companies are trying to navigate this next set of their venture financing or where private equity is going to go. Tell me a little bit about your perspective on market today.
Market today versus, I would say, last year, the year before, I think it's looking a little more bright, less grim. Last year was a rough year for everyone, and I think a testament to that is a lot of people I spoke to were kind of like, at the end of December, I was locked. Like, everyone checked out. Nobody was doing anything. Usually you had deals like right up to the end. Everyone was just tired and exhausted.
So many cycles in 1 year that we just said December never happened.
Yeah, December never happened. We're just going to redo on Monday. In January, which was like a Monday, because as soon as January hit, everybody was off to the races. I would say this has been probably the busiest January I've had before the pandemic was pretty rough. So at the time of the pandemic, I think. I just think people have kind of sat on their hands. I think they've recognized that we are where we are, right? Things are always going to be shifting, uncertain. So how do you protect yourself? You build protections into your deals, your contracts. That's the way you build protections. But for people to wait, I think people are recognizing we'll wait forever. Like, you'll wait in perpetuity, right? So the uncertainty, what did somebody say? The uncertainty is now the new normal, right? It's just kind of you live with it and you move forward.
Yep.
So we'll see. I think that there are more deals, more activity going on now than I said like last year or the year before, especially earlier in this game. Now, I think there's also was a big disconnect between the buyers, the investors, and the companies, because if you think of it, like if you grew up during the pandemic, you had these amazing valuations, right? And if you had grown up during that, your expectation would be like, this is normal. Right. But people who are older, old guard, were like, no, this is just a trend and it's going to swing back, normalize. It did swing back completely to the wrong side, but start to normalize a little bit. And I think it's just people getting their head around, okay, this is actually the reality we're in. And those 2 years, 3 years was pretty much an anomaly.
I feel like venture capital, private equity are moving at a velocity that we just haven't seen before in this compressed time frame, and it's more of a land grab, it seems. How do you advise these, whether you might be on the capital side or you might be on the company side doing advisory? What are the deal terms that they're going past way too fast and you feel like is going to come up later?
I would always say, always be cognizant of what's in your term sheet. I'm a huge proponent of that because I think that lays the road work. I would say sometimes glossing over diligence is not a great thing. We've seen and heard of a lot of situations where you gloss that over and then a huge issue happens later on. And you have to speak to your LPs, like, why did you invest in this terrible thing that had no X, right? Or the board members, like, why did you do such a thing and you didn't really diligence? So I think this shift of the kind of more free-flowing markets during the pandemic was really a pullback to be like, we need to make sure what we're investing in is actually something that is viable. You probably have heard this from founders too, like having revenue. Never, like that was never a thing. It was like, oh, I got a great idea, and I'm smart.
Right.
Now it's a lot of investors want revenue. What is your revenue? How are you generating revenue? those are kind of new tenets that were never something that you had to adhere to. Now, I think the scale and the requirement really depend, right? If you were in like AI, you're usually got a bit of a pass, right? Because it takes a little while. I say ecosystem. So I talk to companies in Canada. They have to have way more revenue generating before investors sometimes in that ecosystem will engage. So it really just depends. But I do think that having more substance to your company is now a requirement. And it's understandable, right? Investors were, again, sometimes people just needed to get into a deal because otherwise they'd lose the deal. So diligence kind of went out and things like that.
I feel like for your background in particular, where you've been inside businesses operating, you've been on the outside advising, you've also understood the technical terms of each of these deal positions. Is the mental model being built around where these companies are investing, right? Whether you're on the founder side and you have a model for where you think you're going to take that money, or you're on the investor side and you're saying, this is the bet that I'm making. Is that clear? And can you really articulate the story with the pace that we're at?
I would say if you are a founder looking for funding, the more that you can articulate that, the better you are, right? Not just saying I'm going to take money and figure it out as I go along. Like especially in your pitches, right? We are taking this money on because we're going to do X, Y, Z with it, right? So that investors have something to point to, whether it be, it's a double-edged sword, right? Did you do X, Y, Z? And you're like, no, then, well, give me my money back. But, it just gives them, again, more ammunition to go back to their LPs and explain why this is a good investment because they're going to use the capital to do these things, which we think, based on our research, will be a viable investment. So I do think that you have to have some understanding of where you're taking this capital in, because again, the dynamics have shifted. Like there is more focus and emphasis on certainty in terms of I'm putting these dollars in, what is going to happen with this money, because we need to know what the outcome will be.
Are you worried about valuations?
I think they are, well, it depends on the industry.
Fair.
Depends on the industry. So I rein that in. Some industries, I'm a little like, ooh, yeah. Some I think we're starting to like normalize a bit more back to like what I remember as being like a Series A, B, you know what I mean? Like those gauges are coming back to normalcy. But I would say that, some industries are just, way too high.
Yeah. How does your advice change based on market, right? So you've worked in Vancouver, you've worked in other parts of Canada. You've obviously been operating in the Valley, and I would assume that your advice for founders and funders shifts.
Yeah.
As you go from non-coastal U.S. markets to where you see some of this very high-paced growth.
Oh, absolutely. So and I was just talking to somebody about this the other day. It's really like, I think all these ecosystems are way different. Somebody had asked me, well, is Canada different from the US? I was like, yes, but I've been engaging with some companies in New York that are different from Northern California, right? So I do think each of the ecosystems are very different. And so the advice you have to give those individuals in that ecosystem have to be consistent and coherent with what their reality is, to be honest, right? Like I was saying, some of the feedback I've gotten from some of the founders in Canada is that sometimes it's harder to gain capital. Obviously, I could speculate, maybe more conservative investors, not really sure, want more return on revenue or more revenue, right? Whereas, here, the thought process is that typically you could get more access to more capital here. Now, I don't know if that's because there's just more investors, right, in Northern California than in most ecosystems, and therefore, if you kick the can enough, you're going to find somebody, versus, New York, and even just the companies that come up in each ecosystem, right? What company will thrive in Canada, Northern California versus New York, maybe all different, right? Just based on the resources that are around them. So I think it is very incumbent on understanding how that, what I would call ecosystem, works and engages so that you can at least advise your client appropriately.
As you think about, you've been on the founder side.
Yes.
You've led a law firm and exited the law firm. So I feel like you've been such a trailblazer for the market. How do you advise the next set of trailblazers as they're going into the next, call it 18 to 24 months? I'm not saying Natasha's going to get back in the game and start her own thing.
I'm too old. No, I'm just kidding. Who knows? Life is short. You never know where
Life
life will take you. That would be, I think, my biggest advice is like, and it's so funny. My partner, Nicole, who was like, we can do this. She's like, no, we've been doing it here. Yeah. We are completely equipped to do it. And, conservative brain lawyer, I was like, I don't know if we could do this. I don't think so. And when you do it, you can. So I think my advice, and this has always been my advice, don't self-select. If you feel like you want to try something, do it. And if it doesn't work out, well, then you go back where you came from. Like that's always been like my mantra in life. If I try this, I don't succeed, I go back where I came from, which sounds maybe elitist and kind of selfish or self-centered, but the reality is you can't let fear dictate how you navigate the world. Maybe that's a better way to put it.
I love that. And I feel like you've had this operating model early on in your career, which we started with, right? Yeah. You operated from a point of confidence and you were able to position yourself towards opportunities, and you were kind of chasing opportunities rather than being in defensive mode, which is so contrarian for an attorney.
It is, very much so. That's why I was told I shouldn't be a tax lawyer. They're like, you're too personable. I was like, what does that mean?
Well, I think you've stood out, which has been great. You've been a great counselor to me, so I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
How do you think the next 18 to 24 months are going to play out in the market?
It is... there's different markets, right? So my practice is very varied. I would say for AI, right, which is an overlay of some things, most things that I do, it's going to be very difficult. I think we've already heard a lot of concerns. I was on a call this morning, just, it's not even just companies, it's like how does the health system navigate what is going on, because each state is very different, right? And making sure that you're consistent across your hospitals, or how do you make sure your multinational companies are, or even international, because the EU is pretty solid, like they have rules and it does impact the US companies. And then also just keeping an eye on what each state is doing and making sure that you are adhering to those rules and not disregarding them because there may be federal legislation that may overturn them, but recognizing that this is the law as it is now. I think navigating all that is causing a lot of concern. I think the other thing that companies need to do is really have an understanding of why they're implementing certain AI and if it's going to actually move the needle for their business. So I think a lot of what is in play right now, discussions is like, what's our return on investment, right? We've put money in, we engaged with AI, what's our return on investment? And I think really it's not that, it's thinking about, well, have we been thoughtful in terms of when we're engaging with AI and making sure that when we did, it would create a return on investment, right? As opposed to just getting all the AI and hoping it'll work out, right? But really having a thought out plan, because I don't think you need the application of AI for everything, right?
If I were building an AI product for Natasha or the firm, and certainly other companies that you might advise, what are two things that you think a builder should build today that doesn't exist?
Yeah, that's hard because there's a lot that's out there. Like in terms of the technology itself, what should be built?
Yeah, what are in your practice today? What are two things that you want to see that would really truly help you in your practice?
That's a good question. I would say, but it already exists, right? I think it's more for me, especially the busier your practice gets, it's really having that, well, we don't use agents at the firm, but a lot of my clients who use them in their companies and businesses say that that's what keeps them very organized, right? Because I would prefer to be very organized and go and engage with people as opposed to worrying about calendaring and organizing things, as opposed to spending my time going to engage with people. So I think it exists. I haven't implemented it yet. It's not implemented at the firm yet, but really I would say something that, especially if you have a larger practice, that can really keep you organized in terms of what's going on.
Do you feel like, even your answer there takes us back to what you said around relationships?
Yeah.
It's time away from keyboards, it's more time with your clients.
Yeah.
Are clients ready for this? Do they want more time from their attorneys? Like, how does the law firm model start to shift?
Yeah, I think that clients are not sad to be re-engaged, right? Because I think for a while, and there was a tail period even after the pandemic, that people just did not engage. It was all video, right? I think what people are craving for now are, and I've been talking to clients about this, is less like large conferences with thousands of people, but more curated things where it's more intimate, it's more pointed, it's more fun, however you want to couch it. But it gives you a little more intimacy to really engage with people on a smaller group level as opposed to large, huge things. And I've even just like law firms, accounting firms, banks having the same conversations where they're saying, this year we're really going to focus our efforts to make sure there's smaller groups doing curated things. Some of them saying that they like, which I was like, that's not a bad, hangover of it. But, just doing more curated things as opposed to just large events where you really don't get to engage with anyone.
I feel like coffee and culture creates connections, something along those lines.
Absolutely. See, you better tagline that.
Yeah, it's coming. It's coming. Is there anything else you wanted to cover while we're here?
No, I just think this is very exciting what you're doing. I think it's really, really intelligent, and excited to see what others have to say.